nothing and everything, right?
Ah,
Nothing's new under the sun, and then at the same time, everything's new at each and every moment.
that's a good philosophical response.
Well, it's true though, really.
Yeah.
It says there's nothing.
Hi, Dan.
Trying to think of something. Hi there. I was trying to think of something, and now I have to look it up because my memory isn't as is not as good. But it concerns the last lesson 5. You know that one about you you never know what here it is. I am never upset for the reason I think. That's what I was trying to think of. There's a story I once heard, about paying the rent, and I forget who it was, but he was early on in his career before he started to become well known and supportive. He and his wife had this cold water flat in New York City, and they were beginning their study of the course, and they were behind on the rent, and the landlord is calling, asking them where the rent is, and his wife answers the phone, and he says to her, "Well, who's on the phone?" And she says, "It's the landlord, and he wants the rent. What should I tell him?" And so he says to her, "Tell him he never knows." What was the line I just read? Oh, geez,
I'm never upset for the reason I think.
Yes, yeah. which isn't exactly what you say to a landlord, but I thought it was funny when somebody, tell him he's never upset for the reason he thinks. That's what I was. I don't know why I couldn't remember it, but
That's a deep sort of psychoanalytical point, right? People flipping about this, that, and the other, and very often they're flipping out about stuff within themselves, which they read. The idea of projection. That's like it's a huge problem in the human
Well,
condition.
why don't we take that hypothetical example and trace it back to where the upset really comes from?
mm,
So here's the landlord, and he thinks he's upset because he hasn't got his rent.
yeah.
So where do you go from there? Let's break it down.
But if you tell your landlord he's not upset for the reason he thinks he is, he's not going to respond very well. That's what was funny.
That's not what I'm talking about. Let's just forget about the landlord for now in terms of what happens next. But to think about, well, what is he upset about if he's not upset about the rent?
Well, obviously.
It's very often, as a general rule, it's not uncommon for people to get upset when they don't get their way. It's a very sort of ego-based response. It's like, my way is not happening, therefore I'll get upset. And especially in sort of relationships of power, where there's a power dynamic, then if the person getting upset is, say, somehow has power over the person or people that he or she's getting upset with, it becomes like a nice, I don't know, confirmation of that person's power, and and sort of an ego inflation at the same time.
Yeah. Well, the Course makes it doesn't seem to care very much about the ego's rules.
Yeah.
He knows.
And for example, it makes fun of our dependence on paper strips and metal discs.
Yeah, I know. I love that stuff.
And all kinds of other material things, as if that's really important. It really minimizes the importance of that. Why do you suppose it says that that's not important?
Because because in the greater scheme of things, as far as the ultimate concerns are concerned, these things don't matter. And if anything, these things are hindrances to what ultimately matters. I mean, from a spiritual point of view, on the spiritual plane, the ego and things that shore up the ego essentially block us from entering into the spiritual dimension. So we really, I mean, all the traditions talk about the importance of shedding, whether literally doing away with stuff, material possessions that we have, or sort of having deep spiritual practices whereby we no longer feel an attachment to those things.
Yeah. Yeah, the Course is so radical that it takes, it doesn't really care about the body. It doesn't really care about our earthly existence.
Exactly. Which is hard for people to hear when they're studying spiritual stuff.
But it's important for people to hear now as we look at climate change during
Yes.
this period of lockdown, where we have lots of time to think about stuff and think about the condition of the planet and how the preoccupation with metal discs and paper strips has got us where we are now.
It's killing us,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes back. What's that?
Yeah. So we're looking at the extinction of human life on Earth, and hopefully, the planet will continue to sustain life, and there'll be some good things happening here, but there may not be room for human beings unless we can really change it, and it doesn't look like we can. I don't know if did you watch that movie, Planet of the Humans?
Yeah, and there was also a rebuttal that some of the stuff wasn't very accurate, but what was accurate was burning trees for biomass is a very dumb idea because you're denuding the trees, which are very important for the ecology. So you're trying to get rid of fossil fuels, but meanwhile you're using something else that's very essential. So it's a bad replacement. And the movie was accurate in saying this is probably not an alternative form of energy that's going to be sustainable or where you want to go. And I was trying to make people aware that some of the leaders have not been in the environmental movement have not been strong enough in saying we don't want to really go with an energy supply that cuts down all the living trees. That's not going to work either. So that was a bad decision. But the thing it's also revealing is the economics of how much money goes into pretending certain things are green, and it may not really be green until you really look at the whole impact of something. You have to sometimes do a little bit more than just a surface reaction. Oh, that's good. We're going to use less burning of oil. But you have to take a look at the context it comes out of. So, there's right now, if we're going to see, the thing is, if we're going to sustain the same way of life where we want everything and every country wants the same thing that the United States has in terms of economic wealth and materialism and the good, quote unquote, the good life, having all these wonderful things that money can buy, it's not sustainable, and we're not going to. The thought is we may not solve it by just coming up with some kind of replacement fuel that does less damage to the environment. That the real work might be changing our inner grasping to take more and more stuff and feel that we have to have so much in order to be happy, and to think of also that we're all part of like one unit. And so like if you're on a boat, like a rowboat or something, and you say, well, this is my section of it, and there's people up front on the boat, you just can't say, I'm going to put a hole in my section because I can do what I want with my section. And we need to really think of the planet that way. We're really connected as one family, one land, one earth, and what we do in one place is going to affect everybody throughout the world. And we haven't seemingly gotten to that kind of consciousness because the system we have totally rewards for the individual getting all the individual wants, regardless of the impact on anything else. And when you have that kind of separated consciousness, you have to change that in order to make the world sustainable. So that's what I got out of that film.
Yeah, I think that's true. The bottom line is that the lifestyle that we are trying to live on this planet with so many people is unsustainable.
Yes.
No matter where you get your fuel from, it's going to be it's still going to be unsustainable. So I remember my experience living in India in an ashram in a cold water flat that, I mean, it was just one small room really. And in one corner there was a bit of a kitchen. We had room on the counter for a pressure cooker that we bought, a 2-liter pressure cooker we bought at the Indian store in town for like 800 and some rupees, which was practically nothing. That's where we cooked our meals. And we bought a little bit of vegetables at a little stand alongside the road where everybody in the community did when we were doing our own cooking. But we had cold water. The showers we took in the middle of the hot day were refreshing, and we got used to all that. We had filtered water. We had some, there was a lot of emphasis on health, but we lived there for $5 a day for the two of us. That was what we paid for rent. Anyway, we were really happy, We were living a spiritual life. I told Karen, if I ever come back here, I'm not leaving. And that's how I felt, We were there for the last time for 6 months, and we stayed as long as we could until our visa needed renewing and we needed to come home because it was going to get real hot. But that's the way the majority of the people live on this planet. And they're making what we consider a sacrifice to live like that so that we can have our television sets and everything else that we have that are necessities, in our minds. It's obvious that lifestyle is not sustainable. And it's also obvious that anything that we come up with, like the environmental movement, is going to be co-opted by the people with all the money, the capitalists, so that they're going to put on Earth Day, 50-year anniversary.
Right.
Is all financed by the polluters.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes, that was what they were showing
and
too.
The environmental organizations are sucking up to those people because they've got all the money.
Yeah, so it's just like politicians with money. Yeah. They'll suck up to interest, and they'll say they're for all the good things, but nevertheless, they can't be where they are without having be sustained by lots and lots of money. That's how the system works. So, unless you're independently thinking and independent from all kinds of financial considerations, and you're pretty sure you're going to be elected, it's really hard to have an independent idea that is counter what the American culture is pushing. Very hard. That's why I try to refrain from criticizing politicians, because I understand that the amount of force that's on them to maintain their position is incredible. And I'm not, and people are not, it's not showing any compassion for the person who's stuck in that thing, who wants to even when they want to work for good. And I think all of them start out wanting to work for good, and then they find that they're doing all these compromises that reflect the mass mind thinking, so they can be where they are. So these are really, that's why I think the only thing that's ever going to save us is spiritual transformation, where people realize, like, the truth that we're talking about from the Course in Miracles and any spiritual path. If you don't do that, you're just it's never going to be enough to. I don't think it's ever going to be enough to solve the problems if you're just dealing with the external world.
So I think, I'm looking at a planet that is probably not going to support human life.
Well, an issue with that I have with that framing, and I'm only an hour into the documentary. I'm still watching it in installments because there's a lot to take in, a lot to think about. So a couple of things I wanted to mention. I'll mention another point before I mention the population issue. It's a quote that I pulled from the documentary itself. The filmmaker, he asks very pertinent, deeply philosophical question, which is, can machines made by industrial civilization save us from industrial civilization? Right, this is Jeff Gibbs, and I would answer no, and this is the answer thus far that we've been getting, that I've gone so far watching now, into that the issue is, it's greater than politics. The issue is it's a question of the paradigm through which we're thinking,
yes,
which is at heart a materialistic paradigm, right? Which is coming out of the, it has a history going back. We were talking about this yesterday, but philosophically, it originates, right? The birth of the modern mind comes from Descartes, and I think therefore I am, which it results in this sort of deeply individualistic, totally atomized self. So it's a paradigmatic problem, and absolutely I believe that the only solution is going back to the traditional spiritual perspectives, or the perspective as presented by the Course, which is not that old, historically speaking, but a perspective that reminds us, not just intellectually, but existentially, that we are fundamentally one. We are fundamentally in this together. It's not enough, right? I don't think it's enough to have this sort of, just to have a kind of intellectual discussion about things, as is often done, not here, but, very often it's like, oh, we need to change our habits. But the consumer mindset is so ingrained in all of us, right? It's a global problem. And the question of population that I take issue with, which was mentioned repeatedly through the film, through the documentary, and one hears this all the time, that a global population of this size simply cannot be sustained by this planet. Well, that's based on, as Dan, you were mentioning, that's essentially based on Western consumer standards, which are absolutely unsustainable. The average Bangladeshi does not consume 1/100th probably, 1/1000th probably of what the average British person consumes, for example, me being a Brit myself. So it's the question boils, and I think it's a deeply, and this is the issue that I take, for example, with all these technocrats, right? The biggest name technocrat currently probably being Bill Gates. Oh, there's too many people. I was talking about this a while ago. The global population cannot be sustained. Who are you to decide this? You who own literally billions and billions of dollars. How dare you decide? Who decide that a life, a brown or a black life, is not worth living, right? And so it's a question of perspective again. I'm convinced, like, from a deeply spiritual point of view, like from an Islamic point of view, for instance, and this perspective exists in all the traditions as far as I can tell, that each and every human being, the Arabic word is rizq, like he or she, by God's decree, comes with what their allotment in this world, their amount of food and sustenance. It's already predetermined by God. And it's not down to me or anyone else to decide whether he or she, like, I have to give each and everyone their due. That's why zakat, charity is an absolute religious obligation in Islam, as in Christianity and all the other traditions. So I think it's a again, it boils down to it's a question of perspective, right? Either I do with less than I'm claiming as my own, and allow people who don't have to actually have, or I say, well, all of this is mine, I rightfully earned it, and how dare anyone else challenge me and say otherwise? Which is
Yeah,
deep
well said.
The course refers to this situation that we're talking about as the world, and it's the world that we made. So when the course talks about the world, it's not really talking about nature. If you do a word search on the word nature in the course, you'll come up with all these positive statements that and sort of also are the kind of statements that it makes about the spiritual level. So as I've said before, nature itself is neutral, which includes the body, as the Course says. But the world is the world of our creation, of our making, that is the world that we need to escape from. And that doesn't mean that we would have to leave the planet or anything like that. But the people who are proposing that as a solution to their dilemma, the ones who have enough money to buy a spaceship.
Elon
That's
Musk,
what you were
maybe.
saying, Hassan, about technological solution, right? Find another planet to fuck up. But
Yes. That's how the ego mind works.
Exactly, right?
And there's never been a
so what I see in
has
the
there
course
ever
is, I see that the course is it's a ticket to ride, but it's not to take us to another planet. It's to take us completely out of this dimension, and just give up the whole idea that we can have a life separate from God. That's what how this whole experiment got started in the first place. That
exactly
we could define our own, we could have our own will separate from God's will. We could have our own, opinions that would matter.
We have probably gone as far as we could go on the individual being supreme, and unless there's an integration of the spiritual piece, I am not aware of any historical example where people had a lot and decided to give it up for the interest of the betterment of other people all around them. The human, it's unless you have some kind of inner revolution, we're not going to hit upon that solution as much as it sounds so great philosophically. Oh, well, the Western societies will all decide to consume less. No, it's not going to happen. What's going to happen is we realize that we're in such desperation and things are falling apart so badly, we have to look at this differently. And maybe we will discover what the Course is teaching, and maybe not. And as far as I can see, there is no guarantees of what we're going to decide.
Yeah, and so the Course is not about changing the world, not at all. It's not about.
And I fight that one, and I have to confess, I fight with that all the time, because before I ever came into the work, I had a very, very strong leaning of that the solutions were in changing the world and making the world a better place. Even my religious tradition, was a Cholom, but there's even the Jewish tradition, there's a thing about improving the world so people live better. It was really, really hard, and I still struggle with it, because I really think,
I got sucked into it when I went back into the world. I got sucked back into that whole thing. I mean, you got to make a living somehow, right? You can either contribute to the problem, or you can imagine that you're contributing to the solution, but there is no solution within that paradigm at all,
Yes.
You can help poor people furnish a subsidized apartment, or you can do things like that, and that's nice. That's good. But that's not really going to change anything.
Exactly.
You can even redistribute income to a large
You don't
extent.
change, right. If you don't change the mindset, you're going to have the exact same problems.
Yeah, yeah. So we think, you know, all these radical socialist solutions, for example, are really great, but they're not. They're not.
Yeah.
In the long run, they, you know, we've got. Oh, so probably, like you said, I think that's really a good observation that no civilization has voluntarily given up their largesse.
Yes.
So that means that their giving it up has to be imposed from some other large civilization. Like, let's say
Yes.
China comes over here, they're buying up the world now. Maybe they could turn Americans into slaves. I mean, that's what's happening already. The United States is becoming a third world country.
Yes.
We're going to just see all this infrastructure decay because the people who are running the world don't care. And that's what's happening all over the United States. The infrastructure is decaying. Nothing's being spent on that. No money's being put into circulation to benefit the masses. The money is being.
If you want to see documentation, if you want to see documentation of that, I just read a book. Chris Hedges goes through United States and just shows what's happening. How everything that was owned in common is being sold to pay off stuff because everything's in debt and the whole infrastructure is crumbling and everything else. So, you know, we just lost Michael McCarthy. Is there a reason for that? Were we upset? Oh, there he is. I thought we were upsetting him, Michael. He disappeared for a second. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got internet connection problems.
Oh, okay. You weren't upset about anything we were saying. My first jump there. Okay. No, it's good to hear that. I'm relieved.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm so codependent of everybody loving me.
So
God help me. God help me. God help me. Okay.
The course doesn't say that we have to have a poor lifestyle as course students. It doesn't say that we have to do anything about our physical situation at all. You take a look at the bad boy of the course community, Gary Renard, one of our favorite teachers.
Yes.
He lives a pretty lavish lifestyle and does a big workshop in Hawaii every year, his favorite place, and wants to live there. But he lives in Malibu, you know. I mean, he doesn't.
He married a cute girl too.
He did, right? And he's just showing us that none of that really matters. I mean, in a funny way, just like Rajneesh with all his Rolls Royces. It was a big cosmic joke.
It was. I thought it was funny. Nobody else did, but I did.
Just like St. Paul said way back when he was when he had been tapped on the shoulder by you know who. He was telling people, don't bother to change your condition. That's not what this is about. It's not to change the world, it's to change our relationship to the world or how we think about the world. And okay, so our lives will probably get simpler and we'll probably be happier. Our relationships will improve. We'll have more time because there's nothing for us to be chasing all the time. So we'll have more time to be together and to sit down with each other and talk and just get to know each other on a really deep level as we get to know ourselves. So that's a typical course student trajectory for this life. And to have more joy and peace and happiness in their lives and to not worry about what's coming tomorrow.
Right.
To be able to receive whatever comes our way because we know that everything is already everything's all right. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it might be paradoxical, but actually, if we really, it's like the Master Jesus taught when he was running around the planet, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all those things would be added to us. And if you really follow the course, you realize that the whole thing of scarcity, which everybody's afraid of, and which why that fear motivates the whole acquisition and getting, and if we don't, we're going to die when we have to have everything. Now, the thing is, if there's an inward shift, then you're not going to have that scarcity, and things are going to work out because you're not following the fear of the ego. You're letting the spirit provide for abundance, and you have to have, like trust, inner confirmation, being able to step out on that, and so forth. And the only way that happens is you have really inner confirmation that these things are real, and that you can trust them, and you can step out on them, and your needs will be met, and not because you worried about them so much and you tried to make them happen. And this is really hard for people to get, and I struggle with it, and I've been doing this stuff for 20 years, 30 years, and I sometimes struggle with it.
Yeah, it's
So,
obviously hard to get it. And these are like hidden treasures that are lying. They're lying, like Jesus said, it's the kingdom of heaven is spread out, and nobody's seeing it. He sees it.
Yes.
These teachings have been around forever, and the majority doesn't even know they're there. Doesn't even know they're there. So, that's the world that we've made. And I want to take now a look at today's lesson, and I want to read our ticket to ride. We've got a ticket to ride.
But you have to sing the song. I'm only kidding.
Lesson 116. God's will for me is perfect happiness. Why would anybody have an argument with that? God's will is perfect happiness for me, and I can suffer, but from the belief there is another will apart from his. Yeah, there's the devil, and all the problems are attributed to another will apart from his, right? And of course, it is very, very adamant, very clear. There is nothing apart from God. It's just an illusion, a delusion of consciousness. Somebody want to take 102?
I share God's will for happiness for me. I share my Father's will for me, his Son. What he has given me is all I want. What he has given me is all there is.
Yeah. Right. Once we accept the fact that we are eternal beings, then the only thing that really is real and matters is that which is eternal. We give our lives to that. We place our welfare, our future in God's hands. Fearless, because we have perfect confidence in God. His will for us is happiness. Isn't that what we want?
Everybody wants to be happy.
Yeah. So we can leave this world behind. Anytime, it doesn't matter. We can leave it behind right now. Just in this way. By putting our trust in God And as you say, we have to, Dan, we have to have the experience of God. It has to be concrete within us.
Yes.
We have to have that experience. And so fervent prayer is a big part of reaching that experience. Going deeply within ourselves in meditation, that's the classroom. That's that the Course talks about, making the world a classroom. The classroom is deep within ourselves. It's a laboratory. We go in there to experience God's presence. That's the only thing that really matters, is we're looking to find that self within. Once we find that self within, and we've identified it, we know what it feels like. We know when we're in contact with that. And all of our spiritual centers open up all by themselves, because the light penetrates our being. We are one magnificent vehicle for the manifestation of God on earth. That's who we are. It doesn't matter what we possess. In fact, it's better we don't possess anything. There's nothing to interfere then with the work that God has for us to do. And that's the only work that really matters. Unfortunately, trying to keep body and soul together, we've thought that we had to participate in this world to some extent, but who knows? We never really questioned that so fully, to know just how deeply in debt we have to get to this world to survive here. Maybe not so much. Given the fact that 95% of the people are manufacturing this world, surely if 5% of us drop out, that's not going to change the world very much. There probably will be enough to go around. I look at the homeless people here in Portland, and they're doing pretty well. I mean, I wouldn't really want to live like that, but shit, they've got food, they've got clothing. When they don't have washing machines, so when their clothing gets dirty, they just throw it away, right? And get some more clothes for free. So we're able to provide a minimum support for people who aren't really contributing to the craziness, in the sense of building up the economy, et cetera, all that stuff that we have been told is our job. Maybe not. I don't know.
Really, I'm
not saying I want to live like that, but I'm saying, that this, we don't know what the limit is. If we decide that we're going to live 100% for God, where that's going to take us. But it's not up to us. If we make that choice, it's up to God. And God needs us, God's going to use us however he can. And that's not our will. Our will, well, our job is to accept his will, which in today's lesson is perfect happiness.
It actually might turn out that the people who are like the model for the next era are the people who are homeless, who have dropped out, who are the bohemian, who have really unplugged from the economic system. That's
definitely a subgroup of the homeless population in Portland.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And those guys they all have really good bicycles, and and they're in great shape, and they know this city inside and out.
Yeah. Yeah. Life is strange, and I know it's going to change 100%, and everything that we worship now is going to reverse like the hangman 180 degrees when all is said and done, because what we believe now is a total, we're on a total destructive path. So, you know, it's like we're backing ourselves up in such a way that we have to change or we're not going to be here. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
We've gotten to that place. I mean, we're rapidly, if we're not already there, we're rapidly approaching.
Yeah. Well, so let's meditate on these.
Right. Will
I'll
of God.
keep this. I'll keep this screen up here so that we can have it to refer to the phrasing that
Thank you.
Jesus put here. And let's just go deep inside and try to contact the self, and then to let the happiness well up from within us. Just allow that. So clear the mind, let go of the world, and let God be our whole experience. So let's go ahead.
Oh, that felt good.
If we can feel the love of God in our hearts, then we can tap into this happiness that is so different from the happiness that the world offers us. It is so deep and sublime. Let's take this into our day, or what's left of it, and spread it around as thick as we can. Extend this love to everyone that we meet on every level. In Jesus' name, so let it be done.
So,
Have a good day
Oh,
or a good evening.
thank you.
hey, you were really on today. I really, I was really lifted by how you presented things today. Really good. And
Thanks,
thank you. I
Dan.
like how you engaged everybody. It's really good. Really was a good session. And I like the meditation and everything else.
Mazel tov.
Yeah. Just trying to be encouraging, that's all.
Thanks, Dan. Have a great
I
rest of your
just
day.
appreciate it. I can't help it. I'm going to do some
I
gardening
know.
right after we come out of here.
Yeah, it's so easy, right?
It is. It is. There's nothing, it's one of the things I was meditating on. There is never anything to be afraid of. There is never anything to be angry at. And when I am, I've just lost the contact again.
That's right. That's right. Just got to get that ticket out. Like the thumb, in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
The Galaxy. I love that book. The trilogy. Wonderful
Okay.
stuff. Love sharing with everybody here today. Love you all, really. And
Thank you.
Time to go.
Bye bye. Take care now. God bless.
See you later.